So welcome back. We're looking forward to continue in this Yud Ches, 18th epistle of this segment of Vigilance. This is the fourth segment, as we all know by now. Of course, those who are part of the class, the newcomers, Tanya, Kadisha is comprised from 5 segments. Again, as we mentioned so many times, this is with precision. This is the Teresh Biksav of Teresh Achsidus. Vigilance would be the fourth. Distinct in its kind. We did have a presentation of the backdrop of Vigilance HaKodesh in the beginning of Yud, the 10th. We're holding now the 18th. In the beginning of Yud, which is the 10th. So no need to repeat. Again, it is definitely a distinct segment, different than the previous. We did merit to conclude the first 3 segments, Likutei Amorim, Shaykh V'Muna, Vigilance HaTshuva. And for that matter, they're all lined up on the original website, tanyaonline.com. So we're learning the chapter, for example. This is the fourth class on this very epistle. To know what we're talking about here. So if you're part of the class, you know exactly what we're talking about over here. But if you're a newcomer and you want to get the understanding of this epistle, tanyaonline.com, it's all lined up on the left side of the screen, and the latter classes on top of the screen is such really easy to identify. So this is the fourth class we're holding, Valkain Avodas Ha'adam L'Kain. Perhaps we started this, but it's a good place to start. Valkain, which is 2-4. So 8 lines from the bottom of page 252. Valkain, and therefore. I mentioned that not only the Vigilance HaKodesh, all the classes, perhaps we just mentioned from the very beginning of Tanya. And it's has the advantage, besides those who want to tap into any part of Tanya, but many times the Alter Rebbe himself cross-references from one part of from Vigilance HaKodesh to Shaykh V'Muna to Tanya and so on, and we learn a subject and we want to know a little more about it, and particularly when the Alter Rebbe, many times we cross-reference, and something is said succinct in the present Pedic we're learning, and it's elaborately written in the other segments, so we just point out, look in that Pedic, and it's so easy to access this, the way this site is set up. It's so easy to access all the previous classes. There's the advantage also, any class you open up, that there's a text on a separate scroll bar, including the present class, that it's easy to follow the text, etc. So the Alkain, Avodas Ha'adam L'Kain, Valkain means to say, and therefore, where's the Alter Rebbe coming from? So again, this is what we learned last week about the 2 levels, or the 2 types of Ava, the 2 types of love that Yid has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We did mention it, that we can justifiably identify these 2 expressions of love to this which it's brought in Shir HaShirim. Alter Rebbe doesn't say it over here, but we did speak about it, and we pointed out that this could be something which is similar, even though not necessarily accurately similar, but it has it gives the opportunity to understand the famous pasuk of Shleim HaMelech and Shir HaShirim Bosi Legani Achai Sikalo, that Hashem tells Am Yisrael, I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. Am Yisrael is a sister to Hashem, or a bride to Hashem. We know it's very distinct, totally distinct in the connection of a sibling sister connection to a bride connection, to a spouse connection. Many times Alter Rebbe writes, yeah, of course this is written with precision, because there's different expression. He expresses his love, or different levels of love, or different types of love he has innately, inherently. He has that love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is like a chaysi, that more inherent love. Less expressional on the surface, less passionate. It's not meant to be passionate, but yet it runs deep. We did mention a sister cannot be divorced. Conversely, a kala, the spousal relationship, doesn't only run deep, and it should, and it can run deep, and namely it's meant to run on the surface. There's a passionate connection between the 2, but because it doesn't have that depth of the sisterly love, the sibling love, therefore there could be a disconnection. So you have the advantage we had in the previous class, again, in the same, literally 1 click away, the class last week, we spoke about this, and the Alter Rebbe says over here, in the end of the day, that every Yid has both levels of Ava embedded in their psyche, embedded in their system as a Yid. They have the Ava, which is Ava Betanugim. It's not exact, it's not accurate. We just brought that as example of Shlomo Melech's expression, which seems to be on the surface two different ideas. How does he package them together in one pasuk? Two words adjacent to each other, they're very distinct. But the point we just pointed out, that you could have a Yid has all the types of levels of love and all the types of levels of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the sisterly connection and the Kala type of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we did draw the line that we could find some similarities and parallel between these two Ava, which the Alter Rebbe brings in this chapter. Again, click away in the previous classes, which we learned very, very much in detail of this first Ava, the Ava Rabba, Ava B'Tanugim, which is a love associated with pleasure and delight. And then there's the Ava, the overall Ava, that the Yid wants to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar to a child. Doesn't know why, and necessarily it's a kind of a passionate love. It's just that's their parents, and we gave the example, they go to an amusement park, and the child wants to go everywhere and wants every ride, but the moment the child turns around, doesn't see the parents, and he's not interested in anything because he doesn't want to ever sever, even for a moment, their relationship with their parents, or to be in close contact and proximity with their parents. So to the Yid has it the same. I never want to sever my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ever. And I know that little Aveda would disconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even it's a mitzvah kala shadivri seifim Aveda, kala shadivri seifim rabbinik Aveda. But in the end of the day, does this sever my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Of course it does, and therefore, chas v'chalila, I never want to disconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that drive it has to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again, it's distinct that the pleasurely love. The pleasure love is an experience of deep love and deep delight and deep pleasure. So the person is already cleaving to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The person is one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The person is the bosom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In contrast to the love, the latter, Hasheni, says the Alter Rebbe began in last week's class, that Ava v'taiba shanefesh mis'ave, it's driven like a child is driven to a parent. It never wants to disconnect from the parent. That's not not much as an experiential love. It's just, this is who I am, this is my parents, I want to be connected to them all the time without any interruption. This is the love which is innate and inherent rather by every single Yid. As the Alter Rebbe says, which again, you can see the parallel. This is more the achesi. Not necessarily there's passion. For that matter, by achesi, there's not meant it to be passion, but it runs very deep. This is the Ava Musuteres. This is an inherent love which exists in the heart of Klal Yisrael. And he says, even in the wicked. And that's why they constantly have the regret when they violate Hashem's Ratzon. Of course they regret because they know that there's a disconnect. And who wants to be disconnected from Avinu Shebashamayim, for the Father in heaven? Yet the taiva is very strong, therefore it's hard for them to get back online, get back on track, that is, permanently, because they have a potent Yetzer Hara. They themselves established that additional dosage of energy to their Yetzer Hara, to their Nefesh Hamis, because of their constant violations. But in the end of the day, once they violate, of course, they have charata, they have this deep regret of the fact that they deliberately disconnected themselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu with their unjustified acts, if it's Maaseh, Dibur, Machshava, action, speech, or thought, and so on. But because they have this Avim, so there's an innate, inherent love in their system, so Charata comes, therefore they have the Charata, they have the regret. It's just because it's so deep, and it's not on the surface, this is why, this is the last words which we left off, if you remember, because it's so deep, because it's not on the surface, because it's not functioning, so to say, as a passionate love, which that's not so easy to have an impact on a passionate love. As opposed here, it's a hidden love, and therefore, again, you could see in the last week's class, therefore, the Ruch Shtus, the spirit of folly, could have an influence on it, and Machti La'odam, bring Rachman and the person to sin. And this is where the Alter Rebbe continues, this is the service of man to his master. To one strengthen himself over the klipa, the negative and impure force, which ultimately that is the ruach shtus, that's the spirit of shtus, of foolishness, of folly, which brings the person to sin. But a person has to strengthen himself again, because when you're dealing with an Abba B'Tanugim, a person has this delightful love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, he's experienced, he's basking in that very love, so then he doesn't have to strengthen oneself over this which disturbs that love. The person is there. He's together. He's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's davik with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's a very, the expression of the love is very evident, very strong, very potent, very deep, but yet depth, and not in the sense that it's hidden, but means it takes over the whole mitzias of the person. He's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then there's no point to say you have to mischazik, you have to strengthen yourself, not to do contrary to Ratzon Hashem. No, you're in Hashem's bosom at the time. As opposed to this love, because it's the Ava Mesuteres, and therefore it's deep, and therefore the Klipa could have a dominance over it. That's the Ruach Shtus, that spirit of foolishness which can make a person sin. And therefore, because it's possible, there could be that governing force of the Klipa. At that point, it has to overcome, strengthen himself. I'm not going to do that foolish thing again. I'm not going to sever my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu even for a moment, nor in action, nor in speech, nor in thought, nor in vision, nor in audio. And that needs chizuk. Because again, it's not a love which is on the surface, experiential love, a passionate love. No, it's an ava mesuteres. Therefore, it can be influenced by the Ruach Shtus, and therefore the person needs to identify this ava, which is really the underlying motor why a person could ultimately continue with his Shmiras HaTorah mitzvahs throughout a lifetime. Of course, there's a deep motor which is function, a motor which is running very deep in this system of the Yid, which allows him to be the Frum Yid for 90, 100, 120 years, till Chaim Nitzchim, every day to put on tefillin, every day to have mezuzah and learn Torah and so on. Of course, there's something very much happening within the system of the Yid, that there's perpetual service with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, but yet because it's so deep, so it could be interfered, and the person has to be on guard. And that's what he says. Yes, we should be on guard. If it needs chizuk, if it needs us to strengthen ourselves and to overcome this klipa, that's what the Yid does. Means say in every word. Now, we did mention it's an expression which comes across a few times. Actually, in Tanya, though, Rebbe has it 3-4 times, which this is, of course, one of them, but we have it in benching. Bakel Mekalkel is based on the Gemara Saita, I believe it's Yudalid Saita, which speaks about each one corresponding to another one of our forefathers. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. By Avram, it's Bakoil. Hashem, Berachas Avram, Bakoil. By Yitzchak, it says Mikoil. By Yaakov, it says Koil. And therefore it says the Shleisha, the Gemara says, Timon Hashem me'enel mabo. Hashem gave the Aves, Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, a foretaste of the world to come, and he connects it with this expression of Akel Mekakel. But here the Alter Rebbe uses that expression. Here he uses the Alter Rebbe expression, understandably, that it shouldn't be only in one area. Here in this area, I'm going to make sure I'm going to be fine with Hashem. But what about the other areas? Every Aveda, every area, when a person is not careful, they sever their relationship with the Kodesh, they disconnect. So, yeah, you're going to be careful in one area, but you're disconnecting with Hashem through that action or inaction, that thought. Hashem says not to think, not to entertain one's mind with, or speech. Or when Hashem says, you have an opportunity to learn Torah. Learning Torah ought to be expressed also, the Gemara says in Erevin, it's a way you learn Torah with his mouth. So when he has the ability to learn Torah, the way a Yid is meant to learn Torah, and he lacks, doesn't want to utter the words of Torah, he chops up the Torah, meaning to say, he chops up the shir. Doesn't learn all the time of the shir, so there's a certain disconnect in that area. And the end of the disconnection is disconnection. Like any other relationship, no one could say, I did that for you, but I did that for you, and I did that for you, but no, that was very important for me, and you made sure not to do that for me. So in the end of the day, of course, that fragments the relationship. And if it exists between two parties, of course, it exists with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Melech Malchem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we know when it comes to any king, the smallest gesture of disrespect, of course, is a demonstration of a total disconnect. In the Esther years, there was severe consequences. The Gemara says, when you're standing in front of the king and you're just wiggling a stick in front of the king, a little twig, yeah, that's Merida B'Malchus, that's rebellion in the king. Here you're talking about Melech, Malchem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's no such thing to say, just here I will be loose, here I'll be and stronger in this area of Torah mitzvahs, and here I'll be not so careful. No, the Alter Rebbe says, of course, we're talking about that ava, that deep level that with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the ava mesoteris, which a yid innately and inherently wants the wholesomeness of that ava, never to disconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it needs strength. It's not the pleasure of love spoken earlier. It's the latter, which is the ava mesoteris, and therefore there could be dominance of the ruach shtus, and therefore a person needs chizuk. How much should he be mischazik himself? Bakoil mikol koil, completely in every single area. This is here in this context. This is the lashon bakoil mikol koil. Don't leave a little loophole here open, a little loophole there open, and try to test the waters here or in other areas and say, oh, maybe that's not so important. No, if it's written in the Torah and if it's even a rabbinic prohibition, that's what makes it important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore I have to be careful in every area of Torah mitzvahs to get strengthen myself over the clip of bakoil, mikoil, koil, across the board, across the line. And now to be specific here, that first of all, chase it away, get rid of it from the body completely, from thought, speech, and action. Which again, here one could also say not about this mitzvah or that mitzvah, or that aveda, but even the way it's divided, machshava dibra ma'isa, thought, speech, and action. One would say, yeah, in action I'm okay. Speech, periodically, a juicy lashon hara, not so terrible. Thoughts, I'm only thinking. HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes in the Torah that you're not meant to entertain your mind with that. And that becomes a prohibition, and therefore we can't cut corners. It ought to be makol mikol koil. That's what the Alter Rebbe writes, machshava dibra ma'isa. Hashem says one is not allowed to entertain their mind with certain, be careful with their eyes. It's a biblical mitzvah for that matter. So one cannot say in action, maybe even in speech, I'm kind of careful, but what about the subtle expressions of my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which usually it's the eyes, the vision, audio, or namely thought, which is connected directly to my thoughts. Maybe not, but not to be so careful. No, the Alter Rebbe says bakoil mikol koil, and therefore when Alter Rebbe articulates his bakoil mikol koil, he says it very clearly. Completely remove it from the body, completely get rid of it, completely chase it away, to the literal translation. From thought, speech, and action, shabamayach, veloshin, in your mind and your tongue, v'ramachivarim, in the 248 limbs. And then once you do that from your thought, speech, and action, of course, what is v'achar kach? What do we need to, where else, what are the areas we have to get rid of it? So we learn a little Tanya, particularly at the beginning of Likutei Amarim. I wouldn't know which, I wouldn't know, it's just what pedic to put your finger on. The entire beginning of Tanya, the very beginning of Tanya, pedic Be, Gimel, and Dalid, and then later Vav and Zayin and Ches, and of course the way the Alter Rebbe brings the message home in Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, that there is two sets, there's machshava dibra ma'isa, thought, speech, and action, which again you have this in the Gimel and Dalid. Dalid begins with thought, speech, and action. Alter Rebbe says that's where really we connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or Chas v'Shalom can reflect our disconnection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What a person has a drive inside, it's not so much that they could be, that would demonstrate their culpability in their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the heart always pumps different messages or sends different signals, not necessarily aligned with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His holy Torah and His holy mitzvahs. What is incumbent upon the Yid is not to allow that signal to enter into thought and speech and action. Again, you can see it towards the beginning of Tanya, chapter 4. Again, I believe we also pointed out the contrast between Peri Gimel and Peri Daled. The first Chelu Likutei Amarim is truly a click away. That the Peri Gimel speaks about the inner workings of the neshama, but there he speaks about the nefesh elikis. Later in Peri Vav, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the whole setup of seichel and midas of the nefesh bahami. So again, and back to what he's saying over here, there is the intellectual faculties known as chochma bina das, and then there's the midas, which are the attributes, the characters of chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, yisei, malchus, and there's a whole setup of the nefesh elikis described in Peri Gimel. Peri Gimel is literally an X-ray of the experience of these 10 faculties, the way it exists by the nefesh elikis. In Peri Vav, it's the way it is by the nefesh bahamis. Alter Rebbe makes it very clear. This not necessarily we could completely have hands-on or control, as we all know it. There's that battle between the Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamis. Nefesh Bahamis would send signals very much animalistic in their character to the human being and say, think that, talk that, do that. And the Yid has complete control and say, I will not do it, I won't think, I won't talk it, I won't even think it, I won't entertain my mind even for a millisecond. We mentioned many times when it comes to machshava, when it comes to thought, even a millisecond makes a difference. Right? Someone says, after 5 seconds I took my mind away of that. 5 seconds in the world of thought is like eating kind of a sandwich in Yom Kippur. Pretty much in the world of action. 5 seconds is a long time. There's 5,000 milliseconds when it comes to the subtle kaiches of the Yid, faculties of the Yid. There, of course, the millisecond makes a difference. And the Yid has full control. That's one of the foundations of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. Has full control over his thought, but yet to say that he has full control over his inner workings, the Chochmah, Bina, Das, the Midas, meaning that the godly faculties, the godly 10 spheres have complete dominance over the animalistic 10 spheres. By a Beinoni, it's not so. By a tzaddik, it begins to be so, as Dr. Rebbe mentioned. There's tens of thousands of levels of tzaddikim. You could see it again in Perek Yud, which Dr. Rebbe enters into the world of the tzaddik and ends off in Perek Yud of the tzaddik gomer, which he has complete dominance over his inner workings as well, meaning to say that what is completely dominant by the tzaddik gomer is only the setup of the 10 spheres of the nefesh elikis, the godly 10 spheres. The midas of the nefesh elikis are completely dominant in the system of the tzaddik. His chokhmah based on is, of course, his chokhmah bin das, his clarity, his understanding, his appreciation of reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's what's dominant by the tzaddik gomer. The tzaddikim, the other tzaddikim which are not gemurim, they have an impact, an indent, they make an indent on their nefesh bahamis. But not only in the thought, speech, and action of the drama, because the thought, speech, and action of the bahamis, even the Beinoni has full control, because the moment he doesn't have control, that he violates an action or speech or thought, if you remember again, this is again the foundation of Tanya, that he's then a Rosh, he's no more a Beinoni. Because one violates HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mitzvah even once, action, speech, or even thought. They're categorically, they're considered a Rosh al pi Torah, even a Rabbon, even a rabbinic violation. So a Beinoni is complete with his thought, speech, and action. And that speech and action has full control. But does he have control over the signals of Nefesh? Was the Nefesh Bahamis, the setup of the Chochmah Bina Das, and namely the Midrash of Nefesh Bahamis, was it minimized? Did it shrink in the experience in the Avodah of the Beinoni? Not at all. The Alter Rebbe has it myriads of times in Tanya, and this becomes again the foundation of Tanya. That's why Tanya is such a beautiful, beautiful manual, such an honest and emes true manual to our Avodah Hashem. The perfect, we mentioned many times, the perfect manual to our Avodah Hashem. Because in order to appreciate Avodah Hashem, we have to know what's really going on in the system. You got to know how the system works. You buy a device, you know what it is, you know how the system works. You know the manual is telling you firstly this is that, and then how to function. This device, and this many wrote svarim, Sifrei Musa, and Yisidosim, B'Harei Kodesh, they were holy tzaddikim, but to have it that perfect, and analyzing the Yid, and as analyzing perhaps even the struggling Yid, in his Avodah Hashem, but to say perfect what's going on behind the scene and telling us all the parts, so to say, of this mechanism called the guf. Actually, the Gemara calls it a ir ktana, and tells us how to function and what's going on, the Avodah of Tefillah, Torah, and out of the Beis HaMedrash and Beis HaKnesses, Tanya is nothing less than the perfect manual to our Avodah Hashem. So this area also, the Alter Rebbe says, the Nefesh Beinoni has a very potent Nefesh Bahamis. The Alter Rebbe says myriads of times, ki tuldosa, the way the person was born, he never made an indent on his animal soul. Because the moment there's an indent in the animal soul, which means the inner workings, the Chacham Minadas, namely the Midas of the Nefesh Bahamis of the animal soul, the person is already on the path to be the tzaddik. The Beinoni is Nefesh Bahamis, is the inner workings again of Nefesh Bahamis, is Midas, is Chacham Minadas of the Nefesh Bahamis are in full tact, and therefore the person would periodically, or many times quite frequently, signals of Nefesh Bahamis. Look there, do that, think that, talk that, and so on. What the Yid has the Kayach, and therefore he's never a Rasha, he's always the Beinoni, is that he has full control, not only in conceptually, but in actuality, full control of his action, his speech, and even his thought. Never to allow the signal of Bahamis. The animalistic, many times you say animalistic, not necessarily it's on the border of just animal, but as we know, the animal could, generally describing the animal, whatever contributes to its comfort, that's what it does. But many times when something gets in the way, it can start goring as well. It does bad stuff. And so too, when we say animalistic desires, not necessarily it's in the world of heter, of the permissible, but many times in the world of the prohibited as well, Rahman al-Islam. And these signals could enter into the person's mind, thought, or speech and action, but the person has full control in thought and speech and action. The Bainis could say no and does say no, and so too mitzvahs say when the Nefesh Bahamis say they relax, don't learn so much Torah, and don't be so careful with your brachas or your tefillah, coming on time to shul, and so on, all these which we're meant to do in the framework of mitzvahs say. The Niyid has an ability, the Bainani has a full control not to allow these signals to enter into the thought, speech, and action. I mean to say that he has a complete authority over his thought, speech, and action to align himself perfectly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, and holy Torah, and holy mitzvahs. Which is again a foundation, a yesod in the Avodah of the Beinani, which is a Leo Kol Adam Yimshech. There's the beginning of Perek Yud Daled, again the first segment. Lukuti Amarim, a click away in the beginning of Yud Daled. It's an important statement. Leo Kol Adam Yimshech. If you're trying to be the tzaddik, which you're not, it just causes confusion and causes a misconfiguration in the whole system, and of course it's not going to work. Like someone tries to take a machine which has certain functions and tries to establish a different function where the machine just simply doesn't have it. Of course it's not going to really work. Not only not optimally work, it won't just do its function. So too he has to know leho, to the way of a beinani, kol adam yimshech. So what happens to the midas of the nefesh habayis? Yeah, it's usually intact. And does it mean all his life that he doesn't have the dominance over the signals coming from the core of the animal soul? Maybe the Alter Rebbe has an expression in Perek of Zion. And again, Lukuti Amar, maybe all his life, maybe all your life, Hashem wants you to have those challenges. But it seems like our Chamanis, when I'm 60 is one thing, 26 is another, but 56, 76, 80, that still have the, well, you be honest, if you still have those challenges, means your Nefesh Habayis is very much intact. And if it's sending you those signals, be honest. Those signals are coming, and now your avodah is to control your thought, speech, and action. That they should not enter, they should not be entertained. The signals could come. It's like a noise coming, just don't ignore it. Don't allow it to be entertained. That's the avodah of the Beinani. If the person feels this, he has the same struggles when he's 60 than when he's 16, well, maybe so, maybe it. Alter Rebbe has this lashon. Maybe all his days is going to have this war and this battle. So, Ivdas Hashem b'simcha, serve Hashem with joy. Hashem has an avodah, perfect avodah, cut out for every single yid, individually. But what about, in the end of the day, isn't it a little rachmana? So we have like this voice within us, or the Nefesh Habayis within us, which is constantly sending these negative signals. Could we ever quiet it down? Could we ever transform it, that the Nefesh Habayis should have some interest or become less animalistic, more like a domesticated animal? We know the difference of a domesticated or a non-domesticated animal. Can we domesticate our Nefesh Habayis? Could we refine our Nefesh Habayis? Could we sublimate our Nefesh Habayis? Can we elevate our Nefesh Habayis? Could we transform our Nefesh Habayis? Well, generically, this is avodah of the tzaddik, not the Beinani. As we just said, and again, this is a yesod, there's important foundation in our avodas Hashem, which again described with the Alter Rebbe Lukuti Amarim, the first prakim all the way till Tezvav. But in the end of the day, the Alter Rebbe himself says, first of all, if you have to look in the Alter Rebbe's in Tanya, look in the Mishnah, a clear Mishnah. Hashem says, "V'achtas Hashem lekecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol meidach." What does the Mishnah say? Why does it say it in a plural expression? Why not "V'achtas Hashem lekecha b'chol lipcha"? Right? Grammatically, it should say with all your heart. Well, lipcha would be the heart, which is the love of the nefesh elikiyos, of the godly soul. And the godly soul, because it's godly, you could say, exercise that love. You have a deep love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now bring it to the surface. That makes sense. The heart of the Nefesh Habayis should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know the heart of the Nefesh Habayis is just doing everything else that the godly soul should not love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, interferes, and it's always in hindrance. And not only that, what does the Nefesh Bahamis, the heart of the Nefesh Bahamis wants? Anything which is animalistic, anything which is not godly, anything which contributes to bodily comfort. And you tell the Yid, in a plural expression, not only godly soul should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but also your animal soul should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How does an animal soul should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Well, that's really the Avodah of the Tzaddik. Yeah, the Avodah of the Tzaddik, everything is transformed. But Torah ala reik tadaber, as we know, Torah speaks about, the Torah says, commands, speaks about the majority of Am Yisrael, their Nefesh Bahamis, the love of Nefesh Bahamis is usually not particularly loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and usually everything else but the love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it interferes with even the Nefesh Elikis should be able to express his love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how could you tell the Yid, V'ahavtas Hashem L'kecha, love HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all your heart, with even the Nefesh Bahamis? The animal soul should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The animal chesed, animal ava, which it loves only usually the bodily, the animalistic, and many times stuff which is even lower than the animalistic, the generic animalistic, as we just said. The Abba, the Nefesh Bahamis can go very low, very terrible, very dark, opaque places, as we know it. And how does it work with the Alter Rebbe's setup of who the Beinoni is? And the answer is, if you look in the Alter Rebbe's Prakim in Perek Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, the Rebbe says this is why davening, which Hashem allows the Yid to daven, you can say better, don't he? Commands the Yid to daven, it allows the Yid to gives the gift, this special bonus called Avodas HaTfilah. So we look at the daven again, 3 times a day in the same Shemoneh Esrei. But if we think, and we learn it, especially in the doctrine of the Rebbe, what davening is all about, it's nothing less than a gift handed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Beinoni, to the average Yid. And Hashem tells the Beinoni that I'm giving you a bonus in these 45 minutes or an hour, how long it takes, based on the time the Shachris is. Give it the hour as an example. Hashem says, in that hour, I'm opening up a window from on high. It's not about you. You're still the Beinoni with a very potent Nefesh Bahamis. But I'm opening up a window. The Alter Rebbe even uses a Lashon. He says, it's Meichin de Gadlus. It's something opens up on high. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows even that Beinoni to have such a deep recognition of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and have an impact on even his Nefesh Bahamis. That the Nefesh Bahamis should want to listen to that tone, to that song of the Lakus, and ultimately be impacted, and at the time it would desire not all the other stuff it desires, the other 23 hours, or let's say the 20 hours, 22 hours of the day, but it desires the Lakus, it can desire godliness. That's the bonus of davening, that the Eibishter gives the Beinoni the ability to transform the Nefesh Bahamis, so to say, tzaddik moments. By the tzaddik, it's 24/7, 365 days a year. This is the life of the tzaddik, a complete transformation. By the Beinoni, it's the other way around. But the time of the tefillah, the Eibishter gives the ability for the Beinoni to have the tzaddik moments, and he could establish a true love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a delight in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The famous chassid, we mentioned him quite a few times in the past, that the famous chassid said when a person would execute a real good, healthy, sweet davening, there's nothing comparable to it. No other time in the world would even come close. But of course, a person has to really be able to exercise real health. We're not talking about an external shackle or a gishrei, a scream or something. We're talking about a deep, sweet, healthy davening. It's precious. Categorically, of course, the Beinoni enters into the arena of the tzaddik. You can't think of a greater bonus in the life of the Beinoni, the life of any healthy Yid. But it's a real, tangible, palpable pleasure that the Yid is really able to experience at the time of davening. Does it mean the entire hour is that? No, the person gets into it, and there's moments. Even a moment, the person could be in this, have that ecstasy, the experience of transcendence and ecstasy and a connection and delight in the Ein Sof, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's extremely, extremely pleasurable, and of course that makes an impact. And the animal soul is driving towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what the pasuk says. When do we say it? We say it usually even by davening. a whole day, the Eibush is not going to be real. It's not going to be necessarily real in the life of the Beinoni. So on one hand, you can say V'ahavta, the Eibush is also talking to the tzaddik, and the tzaddik is 24/7. But even the Beinoni, Eibush gives the Beinoni this opportunity. But usually, it's by davening. That's when we say V'ahavta. The Eibush just telling this is part of the command. V'ahavta Hashem lekecha. You should daven. You should prepare yourself to daven. Prepare yourself to daven and daven like a mensch to the extent that you're able, again with my help, because it's not really the Beinoni himself on his own. It's a window from on high, but I'm going to work together. You do it right on this, your plane, and I'm going to be right there to allow you to have that experience of Ahavtas Hashem to love with all your heart. Means not only the godly soul is going to love HaKadosh, which of course, what else does a godly soul love? It's chelik al-kamimal. It's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, it has a love. It has a love, a passionate love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that's the nefesh l'kis. But the yid, through the time of davening, could also have the b'chol levavcha, even the nefesh bahamis could have that potent love, passionate love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's meant to, and that's part of the command to the yid, daven like a mensch, and you will see, you'll be able to truly experience this very experience of the nefesh bahamis, the total transformation, at least in the time of davening, of the nefesh bahamis. Here the Alter Rebbe speaks about this idea, introduces in this Perek also, or when he speaks about the Bakoil Mikil Koil, tells the Yid that we know you're a Beinoni. We know we're talking about the Yid, which is the Beinoni. So how could you say Bakoil Mikil Koil? Yes, Machshav Diber Ma'isa, full control, action, speech, thought. And I can get rid of it completely. And I need chizuk, again, because you're doing the Ava Mesuteret, it's the hidden love. Not the first, it's the fourth, it's the latter. And there could be a Helen Behester, there could be a dominance of the Ruach Shtus, as the Lashon Alter Rebbe Machti love. The person that therefore has to strengthen himself to chase it away. Bakel Mikol, yeah, Machshav Diber Ma'isa, thought, speech, and action. But is that really Bakel Mikol? When I know that inwardly I have a full set of 10 sfiras of the Rosh Bahamis, which again, everything it shares with me, everything the Nefesh Bahamis intellectualizes is not things which are purely intellectual. It's just like, where is I can figure out where is that which I can go ahead and stretch my hand to, or where is that I can go ahead and look out and seek this item which is ultimately going to contribute to the comfort of my animal soul, ultimately my body. That's the intellect of the Nefesh Bahamis. Chochma, Bin, and Das, and namely the midas of nefesh bahamis, which is kulei behema, the whole idea that it's inclined, the chesed, the love, the gravitation is just this which contributes to my bodily pleasures and delights. And then you say bakel mikel kol, to get rid of it completely. No, I have like this inner negative motor, animalistic motor, and negative, of course, anything which is not associated with the kedusha, with the absolute kedusha of categorically negative, but again, they wish to set it up that way, but in the end of the day, there's a nefesh bahamis to say makel mikel koil. Comes out to Rebbe and says, work on it. So on the overall work on it, I'm not a tzaddik. But of course, when Allah says work on it, and you'll have the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take chase away makel mikel, daven like a mensch. Daven every single day. Don't compromise on daven. Actually, the Alter Rebbe has, in the beginning of Vigilance, the very fourth segment, the Alter Rebbe has, Yom Yidrashun Hashem. The Alter Rebbe demands that you should daven every single day, because that's the time that I'm giving you that bonus. You're going to forfeit that bonus which I'm giving you, that you could enter into that arena of the tzaddik, to have that true pleasure, beloved HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that your nefesh bahamis will be transformed towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you're going to ignore it. It's a relationship that you can establish today. Why would you wait till tomorrow? And this is part of the message also. Work on a healthy order and discipline in your davening on a daily basis. And then we have mincha and ma'ariv, as it says in Chassidus, that it's not at the same time, because it's usually an extension of the experience of Shachris. It doesn't need another hour, because you're already passionately connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on that level that you could just reignite it in time of mincha and time of ma'ariv. But hold these times precious, so at least a significant part of your day. But not only in the hour, of course, in the hours it's quite minimal. How much is it of the 24 hours a day? Even a person is able to stretch his davening 2 hours a day, as an example, between Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, and Krishma Shalamita or whatever. It's still a minimal part of the day, but nonetheless, this is part of your experience. This is part of who you are. So you have something within you that you have the bakol mikol kol. You're reading the nefesh bahamis even from those areas, the subtle areas, which is not only machshava. Machshava, you have full control, 24/7. But even the nefesh bahamis, the midas of the nefesh bahamis, the meichin of the nefesh bahamis, could be transformed. So if you're careful with it. So this is also part of the girush, the chasing away of the klipa bakol mikol kol, even in the inner workings of the Beinoni. Number one. Number two, as it says in Chassidus, and Alter Rebbe alludes to this over here as well, that a person davens every day. In the end of the day, there could be somewhat a shtel, if you will. Yiddish shtels are a certain approach to reality, or to Zavedas Hashem, a little bit tzaddik-like, and that's not really tzaddik-like. And Alter Rebbe, for that matter, hints to this, and not only much more than hints, he sets aside the second half of the 14th chapter, after the Alter Rebbe makes it so clear who the Beinoni is and the difference of the Beinoni and the tzaddik. And he starts Perek Yudal, his very fourth chapter, Eileho kol odam yimshech, that a person has to be driven to the Avodah of the Beinoni, not the tzaddik. And the Alter Rebbe mentioned also in the Holokoti Amorim, there's four chapters that are broken into two. And one of them is Perek Yudal. The first one is Perek Yudal, because the second part of Perek Yudal, the Alter Rebbe says, didn't Hashem tell you to hit tzaddik? When the neshama comes down into the world, it says, the Gemara says in Nida, Mashbin, I say that's the way the whole Tanya begins. Tanya say Perek Gimel in Nida. Mashbin, I say to tzaddik b'al ti rasha. Be a tzaddik and don't be a rasha. And the Alter Rebbe translates this oath as be a Beinoni. Again, in a very encapsulating manner. Few words, be a Beinoni. You want to encapsulate the message, Ti Tzaddik B'al Ti Rasha, in the doctrine of the Alter Rebbe in these first chapters, is be the Beinoni. Comes the Alter Rebbe in the end of Perek Yudal and says, let's not overlook the fact that the Eibishter didn't word this oath, be the Beinoni. The Eibishter worded carefully with Tihi Tzaddik B'al Ti Rasha. Of course, in the overall, the main part of the message is to be the Beinoni, but nonetheless, the Eibishter used the word Tihi Tzaddik as part of this, again, this sacred oath. And therefore, the Eibishter tells, the Alter Rebbe says, there's a message even to the Beinoni. Do whatever you can to be the tzaddik. Again, you have to be careful as we learn that chapter, because the Yesod of the Alter Rebbe needs to, and this message at the beginning of Tanya is that we have to be very careful who we are or who we're not. The Beinoni should never believe that he's a tzaddik if he's not. It's not good. But in context, again, you have to see that chapter. The end of the 14th, or the second part of the 14th, is a click away also in this website, tanyaonline.com. You can see the message of the Alter Rebbe. At the end of the day, there's something that we should try to identify somewhat with the tzaddik. Again, carefully, to be careful and to understand what the Alter Rebbe is saying there. And the Alter Rebbe is alluding to this idea over here. So first of all, how careful we have to be. Be careful with our avodas tefillah. But together with that, we have to know that there's something that we have within this system of the Yid, that he could be megarsha bakol mikol kol, even from the inner workings of the Yid, inner workings of the Beinoni. That's what the Alter Rebbe continues. We'll stop over here, but we'll read just a little bit more text. And therefore, after following thought, speech, and action, we have the ability, the Eibishter gave us somewhat the ability to pull it out with great strength and great determination from its deep incarceration, which again, of course, Dr. Rebbe is talking about the inner workings of the Nefesh Bahamis, as we just explained. Which is the Lashonos of the Psukim. We know many times Dr. Rebbe uses in the entire Tanya, myriads of times for that matter, expressions which are parts of the Tanakh. Even this line over here, it's an expression of the Tanakh. But in this context, Dr. Rebbe, to be strong and to be mighty, to have the might, the heart, the might of the heart, with the additional strength, that the that this love should not only reflect in thought, speech, and action, that the person's thought, speech, and action should be perfectly aligned with the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meaning to say that in action he should be not only careful but scrupulous in his avodas Hashem, be careful in his mitzvahs leisus, and be careful in mitzvahs asay, and so too in speech to be careful with every word that he or she would utter. And of course, on the positive side, to use the gift of speech in matters of tefillah and Torah and so on. Tzedakah, gemilas chasadim, kindness, charity. Thoughts, to be careful with one's thought. Chas v'shalom, not to violate the command of Alisa Surah Achil Babcha. And so too, to put our thought on the positive side, to put our thought, invest our thought in this, what Hashem wants a Yid to invest their thoughts in, primarily the thoughts of Torah. Appreciating Torah, understanding Torah. And even then utilizing thoughts in, of course, in the context of prayer, or even a structured thought, how to help another Yid, another party, another human being. That's number one. And with this, the Yid Bein has full control. But beyond that, the Yid has the ability to take that Ava and allow this Ava to flow through the entire system of the person. Even the inner workings of the Yid, the inner workings of the Bein. All the faculties of the soul, which is again vested in the body. As he's going to go on to explain, and he's going to point out, and again, you're going to see, as Hashem in the next week, that the Rebbe goes and go, kind of you see that he's using terminologies which the Rebbe himself uses, and we can simply appreciate with the wording of the Alter Rebbe that this is the preparation he makes when he as he prepares himself to the Avodas Hatfilah. He's beinunus. You can see the lashon, or if you're reading it over here, you could peek into what the Alter Rebbe is going to say. So the Alter Rebbe is speaking exclusively before davening? Not necessarily. It doesn't say the word tefillah over here. But if you look at the Alter Rebbe's word, it's the classic presentation of the Alter Rebbe, or all those who prepare to Yid to daven. This is what we're meant to do, to utilize our intellectual faculties in understanding and appreciating HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, consequently, it has an impact on our heart, starting from an nefesh elikis. But again, it would spill over to the nefesh bahamis, which is namely the experience of davening. But Dr. Rebbe says, in the end of the day, if this become the default of the Yid, that he's feels always in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that every opportunity, even when he's not learning Torah, of course, when we have an opportunity to learn Torah, Torah is chachmas shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knowledge and the wisdom, the wisdom and the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is across the entire Torah. But the idea that a Yid has the ability to constantly think about the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is similar to his or her preparation of davening, or the sensation of it at the time of davening, could, for that matter, spread out through the entire day as well. And as such, if the person is able to have that structure, that healthy structure in their Avodas Hashem, they could succeed on the entire Bakayel